Today's webinar, Microinteractions, The Details That Delight, will be presented by Jessica DeJong and Pete Amundson. Jessica is Associate Art Director here at One North. She collaborates with clients to deliver interactive solutions, including creative strategy, website design concepts, and brand development. Pete is an architect at One North. He manages the development teams responsible for architecting and implementing web solutions for clients within Team Central and acts as technical consultant on key client initiatives. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Jessica and Pete.
Thanks, Tanya, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. We are excited to be talking to you about microinteractions today. So at a high level, microinteractions are something that can have a big effect on your website for not a lot of effort. If you think about it, microinteractions can be considered atomic design moments. They're tiny, tiny moments we have with our users. They're opportunities to delight and to humanize what could be an inhumane system otherwise. So they add delight, they make the system humane, and they make it effective. Microinteractions are often the little details that separate something you tolerate from something you love. Now, if that doesn't make sense, we're going to have more concrete examples later in the presentation. But it's just good to think about how these details can have a big emotional effect that are greater than the sum of their tiny parts. So if we step outside of web for a second and just look at other industries where details matter, you can really see how valuable these are to the user's experience. If you think about buying a suit, you can buy a suit off the rack, but if you have it custom tailored, that can make all the difference. And it's really that final 1% that makes such a big difference. So I got a great example here. We've got Dwight Schrute, assistant to the regional manager, wants to look good for work. He's got his suit off the rack, but wants to go that extra step to add that detail. So Dwight gets his suit tailored, and you can see what a big effect that has. You know, luxury cars are known for these details. So here we've got the Phantom for Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce pays exquisite attention to details like this. So here's one of many examples in their cars. They've got the umbrella that's built into the side of their car. Doesn't really have anything to do with how the car runs, but it's absolutely a detail that delights. You may be wondering how we fit Breaking Bad into a webinar about microinteractions, but this is actually a great example. I watch Breaking Bad religiously, and I don't think I ever noticed how the color of maybe Skylar's blouse affected my, my reaction to the show. But I found this infographic online, and if you can believe it, Vince Gilligan, the creator, sat with a colorist and made a conscious decision for what color each major character wore in every episode of Breaking Bad. This is definitely not a detail that I consciously noticed, but I definitely, on a subconscious level, appreciated just how well done everything was in this show. So hopefully we have some Breaking Bad fans out in the audience today that can appreciate this. Another out-of-industry example is the wax seal on a Maker's Mark bottle. I actually have this on my bar at home, and I don't even drink whiskey. I just think it looks really cool. This little detail, the red wax seal, is so valuable to the brand that they actually had this trademarked. So here's a great example that Pete and I, when we were talking about these details that delight thought of, Pete actually has one of these at home.
I love it.
So if you guys aren't familiar with Nest, it's a product, or it's a company that takes ordinary appliances. What you're looking at here is actually a thermostat, and it makes them extraordinary. And they really do this through the use of these microinteractions. So when your thermostat is on your wall at home, this is actually what it looks like. Totally black interface. There's nothing, when you're not using it, nothing that clutters up the UI. Now when you start to walk up to the Nest, the interface gradually fades in and allows you to interact with it. So it's a very smart microinteraction, and it's one of many, many details in this product that make it absolutely delightful to use. So just to kind of close out this section, we got the very famous Eames lounge chair with a quote from its designer. And we really take this to heart. The details are not the details. The details make the design. This quote is actually a favorite of Dan Saffer, who wrote the book on microinteractions, and he felt so strongly about this concept that he wrote a book about it. So we hope that those examples kind of just show you how important details are in general. And now we want to go back to web and show you some examples of microinteractions you already use. Even though you may not be familiar with this term, the concept has been around for a really long time, and these microinteractions are built into your operating system. They're built into your appliances at home. I've got up on the screen here one really common example we all use probably thousands of times every day. So you've got some text on your screen and you're moving your mouse around. Well, how do you know that that's a link? Easy. There's actually 3 microinteractions that are at work here. You've got the cursor change, so from the just the arrow to the hand. That's probably the most common way you know it's a link. But we've also added a color change and an underline on the text. So that's a microinteraction. That's a perfect example of one. In the mobile space, the pull to refresh is a very common microinteraction that's gestural. So if you want to refresh your email inbox or your Twitter feed, you just pull down, you get the little refresh animation at the top, and then the new content gets pulled in. So these are just some examples that you have interacted with every day, probably subconsciously. You probably don't even think this is a microinteraction. And that's kind of the point. They're well done when they're invisible. Jared Spool, who is the founder of Usability Interface Engineering, had a great metaphor for microinteractions. He likened them to air conditioning. He said, you know it's working when it's invisible. You typically only notice air conditioning when it's really, really hot or really, really cold. So you can think about microinteractions that way. And just a side note to anybody else that's in Chicago today, you probably don't appreciate this metaphor. This was my phone this morning. It said it was -0 degrees, which I didn't even know was a thing. So anyways, back to microinteractions. So we've shown you here how these microinteractions can be little details that delight your user, but they really can work even harder than that. And some microinteractions are so important and so valuable to the brand that they're known as signature moments. And you're all aware of one very, very common signature moment, probably the most famous, and that's the Facebook like. It's just a tiny microinteraction that was added after Facebook had been around. It wasn't even part of the initial release. But it's become so prominent and so integrated into the brand. It's actually on the sign of the Facebook campus. This is the billboard as you enter the Facebook office campus. So we're not advocating everybody create a like button or something comparable to that, but this just shows how important these tiny details can be into the brand and just the overall user experience. Microinteractions are becoming, and you will see how they become even more important as the multi-platform experience continues to expand. You know, we all know with responsive design is a very hot topic in web right now, and we have so many devices and they're just growing. We've got, you know, screen sizes are growing in both directions. We've got monitors getting bigger, more smartphones coming out every day, tablets, we've got smartphones, even wearable technology like Google Glass. And these microinteractions offer a consistency of experience among all of these devices. If you think about the Facebook like or, you know, simply sending a tweet, that's the same experience. It's the same microinteraction across all of these devices. And so as we, you know, attempt to create those user experiences, they'll become even more important. All right, so that kind of introduces you to the concept of microinteractions at a higher level, but we really wanted you to have something concrete to take away from this webinar, some ideas that you could implement today into your website. So I'm going to hand things over to Pete, and he's going to give us a lot of really great examples of microinteractions and a couple other ideas that you'll be able to implement.
All right. So actually, to start out with, we're one of the the less tech micro-interaction is actually the voice of your website. And this is actually something called microcopy. It's a way to convey your brand without a kind of the visual imagery. So this is the little things in how you say something on your site that actually almost empathize with a user. So an example of this is search fields. We're going to show you kind of a good example of this. And it's how you get people to interact with you. Confirmation messaging, error pages. When something goes wrong, you just want to say, hey, we're sorry, or convey, hey, this is somewhere you can go afterwards. It's the small things, and it's you kind of have to consider that every moment that a user is on your system is a moment for branding, even when it's not kind of that primary piece of your brand. Here's a great example. Again, we're going back to Facebook here, but instead of saying, type your update or whatever, it actually says, what's on your mind? What are you doing? It's embracing the user. Here's an example of a 404 page from the Ladders. It's conveying their brand by saying, hey, this page found a better job. And then saying, okay, we know there was a problem, you can report it, or you can just go back to the home page. Here's a really fun example from Lego. It conveys the brand by having, here's a Lego person. It's really fun. It's really interesting. And again, it's this moment in time where a problem happened, but you're embracing the user and conveying your message. Another primary example of this is, again, speaking human, being empathetic. Instead of search, maybe say, what can we help you find? It's a easy change. It doesn't take much effort. You may not even need to have any help with this. You can go update some labels right now to humanize yourself to your users.
That's a great example. It would be easy for somebody to implement on their own site.
Okay, so we're actually going to go into a web browser and show you ideas for your site, some transitions, some animations, kind of a quick bullet point. We're going to be doing some CSS3 transitions, some CSS3 transforms, and contextual animations. Now,
okay, Pete, I don't speak geek, so I have no idea what those mean.
Yeah, and so this is again being a tech person. This is what I speak. This is how I speak. But we're going to show the examples. I'm going to point out, hey, where am I talking about transitions? Where am I talking about transformations? And then, of course, we'll see some neat little animations. We're going to let's hop out of here. And hop into Safari here. Okay. What we put together here is a neat little concept site. The first set, we're going to go into some of these general concepts. Now, you may already be doing these. Actually, the very first example of this is the basic cursor example that Jessica was saying, where I'm hovering over a link, the cursor changes to a pointer or an arrow. Of course, there are lots of alternative cursors out there. A move cursor, it's conveying a different message to the user, and because it is that focal point, it's very upfront and noticeable to the user. And in modern browsers, you can actually have a custom cursor. So this isn't an animated dog that follows you around. This is actually a way of conveying, hey, I could add something if I click this button. So another basic example is the transition of colors. So right now on your site, your links, they may be flashed back and forth between white and blue. That is the basic browser-based color transition. But with CSS transitions, you can actually fade those in. So that's fading in the color back and forth. This has about a half-second to a third-second transition time. It's a good, clean transition. It doesn't, I mean, we're not looking to add a lot of functionality, just make it look clean and beautiful and interesting. Another example, of course, we've gone a little bit further. We're now transitioning the background color. This is great for menus. So you're hovering over your navigation menu and maybe the colors are flipping back and forth. Well, you can actually make those be softer transitions. And of course, we can transition both. So we're doing the color and the background color examples. Now, some flyout panels. So these can be menus, these can be hovers, these can be just a basic, I'm showing a little extra information. Right now, you may have one that pops straight out. It can be a little bit jarring. It's
So this one has no finesse. This one has no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of an example of how you transition from something you may be doing right now to adding just a little bit of a more polished feel. One of those examples is kind of the fade in, fade out, and of course an expand and collapse. So this is doing a transition of height as well as hiding and showing. So those are really basic examples. Those are very simple things that can be put in place without much effort. We're actually going to see a little bit of a micro-interaction all throughout this site, including a contextual animation here. If you notice, and it may not come through the best in the webinar, and we'll pass out this link for you guys to look at, but when I click on the hamburger, or the navigation menu, the 3 lines actually turn into 2 and animate into an X. So it's showing that I can both open and close using the exact same button. It's just kind of moving to make room for plenty of the navigation items here.
Pete, the reason I really like that is you're not adding anything to the interface. You're not cluttering it up with now you'd have a menu icon and a close button. I like how that you're using existing elements to add context, and I think that's one of the great things micro-interactions can do.
Yeah. All right, so again, those were the basic examples, very simple. You're probably doing, you might be doing some on your site already. We're going to go into navigation. Again, this is, I'm going to be expanding on some of the same ideas. So right now, you can hover over your navigation. Maybe you just are showing content underneath it, flipping back and forth. It can be a little jarring if someone's mousing over and maybe they really want to get to that third item and the first 2 show up and pop up. A way you can improve on that is actually adding in a transition with a delay. So I'm going to show you showing an item. This is the fade. We showed this before. But if you kind of go along, it actually has a timing mechanism that says, I'm going to wait a little bit to make sure the user really wants to interact with me before I display. It's very subtle. It isn't a huge difference in how you're working right now. It's just making sure the user wants to interact before you imply that they are.
That's kind of a good example of the micro-interaction being invisible. I don't know that I'd notice it, but now that I'm seeing the 2 next to each other, I definitely would prefer the second version you've shown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another example, so we have kind of our overlaid type navigation. We also have our push down. So this is an animation doing both a expand, so changing the height, but also fading content in and out. So just a very smooth transition, toggling between fades them in and out. I'm not sure if it really comes in with the
Over the GoToMeeting.
Over the GoToMeeting, but it is just a lot of smaller transitions to show that you really care about the interaction. And then, of course, I have to throw in a little bit of a fun example. And this is using multi-stage animation. So this is using that animation plus transition. And what this does is it's kind of a cool slide down, expand, and then so it slides down, it expands in width, and then it expands down. It's just kind of something fun. It's, again, this is a series of transitions. There's functionally not much difference between this example and this one as far as how the page is constructed. So cool, fun examples of navigation with different ways of interacting with them.
So if I have a site that's up right now, are those easy to add to my existing navigation, or do I need to wait until we redesign our site?
So the best part about these type of transitions is that a lot of them can be retrofitted directly onto a site. So there's not a full rebuild that's required. I will absolutely have to caveat that, but it really depends on what browsers you're supporting and really how it was designed to begin with to see if it really fits with the interactivity that you're suggesting.
Okay.
Okay, and then another primary example of what types of information we display right now, and that's the related info, this tabular data. It's kind of boring. It's a lot of information, and users may want to see some of it, but they may not. So this is a lot of information. I see John Smith. He's a partner. He's in Chicago. He's got all of the contact information is right there. Well, what happens if I only really cared about Thomas Smith? An example of kind of hiding away that content that they really didn't need, and then adding a neat transition just to show when the user wants to engage that they can see it. And that's an example of this is the hover and pop-up. So very common. We see this a lot. But we're getting a little bit of a transition here, fading in. We've got a little kind of opacity to say, I know there's content underneath it. Very, very easy, fun example to put together. Another one, very fun. I remember getting quite a few chuckles about this at the Experience Lab, but doing the flip. So it's a little bit more interesting of a twist, and it also does those 3D transformations. So this is, as far as browser support, 3D transformations are farther up. So you're going to be like an IE10 and higher. You're going to be in modern Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. But this transition is actually has two sides to it. So you hover over it, and there's the most important information. You're saying, hey, look at Brant. Here's his information. Look at Kalev. Here's his information. I renamed them. These aren't real people. But very fun example, and it's visually interesting just to watch it kind of flip back and forth. You almost want to just touch and play with the site. Another very interesting and fun example is a contact wheel. If you use, I believe, Path, you may actually recognize this, but I really thought it was fun, especially for types of information that lead you somewhere else. So this is, so you hover over Victoria, and you see that she has 2 offices, and this is great use of iconography as well. 2 offices, a phone number that you can contact her on. You can go to her bio, or you can send her an email. So very fun example, and we'll actually maybe hopefully the example comes through pretty well. But it's actually it's spinning out, it's expanding, it's giving you kind of the rotary dial feel of all the information about a user, and it's actually very touch friendly. It is as far as the animation goes, and it's very. I don't know, I just love playing with it whenever I was putting this together.
Well, and from a visual perspective, I like how much information you have in that area, but on the initial view, it's very clean and uncluttered, and then you're only revealing that information when someone interacts with it. So I'll definitely be using this construct.
Yeah, and there's just a minor other animation in here is just making sure that the links change color.
Mm-hmm. The micro-interaction within a micro-interaction.
Yeah.
Inception.
Okay, and then again, so we've talked about the general ideas. We've talked about how navigation can have microinteractions in it, how displaying lots of related tabular information. But let's talk about long content. So this is you've got a lot of text. You've got long articles. You want people to read it. You want people to engage, but you also want them to keep reading. And we've got two kind of fun examples of a micro-interaction in here. First off is while they're reading, we actually up here on the top, if you notice, as we wander along, and it doesn't come in the best in the GoToMeeting, but as you're scrolling down, as you're progressing through the article, you have this nice, tiny representation of where am I at within the actual article. And one of a fun way to actually expand on this is you can actually have breakpoints within the content. So you could say at 50%, maybe you have almost like a little icon that says, at this point, a new topic starts, or a subtopic within the article. Just very fun.
But subtle. I like that.
Yeah, it's very subtle. It's not meant to clutter the screen. It's just meant to show a little bit more information about how you're progressing through an article. And then one more example of a tiny little micro-interaction. And this is almost an adaptation of what we call the highlight, in where at the bottom of an article you may have a bucket of information and different articles that maybe someone would want to read after reading this. Well, this kind of hides it away. It makes it a little less upfront and prevalent, but it also shows you the information only when you need it. So as you're scrolling away, if you're not at the bottom, it's not telling you to read more. So this isn't telling you to leave the article until you've actually finished it. You've actually completed what you wanted to do, and now it's saying, show next, go to the next one. This is a good example of where you could say, would you like to read more about this topic? And then continue along. And again, we've got some fun transitions. We've got some animations just to show off the type of fun things you can do in CSS3.
Very cool examples, Pete. Thank you.
I think I lost you here.
All right. Well, thanks for showing us those animations. And again, we can send out that link afterwards so that you can play around with all of those micro-interactions Pete went over. So those are all great, but how do these micro-interactions fit into your brand and your overall brand strategy? When I was reading the book Microinteractions, a great quote really jumped out at me as it relates to your users. And that quote, I've got up on the screen right now. Details demonstrate that care has been put into the product and attention has been paid to the user and their needs. And really, in every part of your website, I mean, this would be a great takeaway if your users felt that you had taken that extra step to be attuned to their needs and tried to enhance their experience. So I thought that really brought this full circle. We have about 20,000 moments every single day. So for your waking hours, that's about 3 seconds per moment. And those are so fleeting. Those moments we have on the street, with a website, with a person, they're so quick that they're either positive or negative. It's fairly binary. And so you don't know where a user is going to be when they interact with your site. And so we just really have to capitalize on these opportunities to delight our users. And again, the beauty of these micro-interactions that we've presented to you today is that if you like these ideas, you don't have to wait. You can always add these little details at any point of the website's life cycle, whether or not you are engaging in a redesign this year or if you just want to spice up your menus. So we hope that our presentation today has delighted you. And at this point, we're going to pause and collect some of the questions, and we will be back in a moment.
And just a reminder, if you have a question, you can submit it using the question function, which is located in the GoToWebinar control panel at the right side of your screen. Okay, our first question is, if I need to support older browsers, is it possible to implement microinteractions?
So it is absolutely possible to implement microinteractions in older browsers. There will be some fallbacks that we may need to put in place, or instead of using CSS3, we may have to put in JavaScript if you really want to support, especially this really comes into play when we're talking about IE8. Now, IE8 doesn't support anything CSS3 related. There's a reason why it's sunsetting in April. And then IE9 actually has quite a bit of support. So IE9, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, all of those have quite a lot of support for CSS3 transitions. So older browsers for the next, I assume we're talking about IE8, for the next 6 months, there are ways to fall back, to gracefully degrade your micro-interactions so that they can still get an experience, but it's not that premium, not as premium as you're getting with a modern browser. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Okay, our next question is, are all of the examples you showed mobile or touch-friendly as well?
So some of them are right off the bat. I spent quite a lot of time working on this, but I didn't do everything to make them perfectly touch-friendly. Most of them can absolutely be utilized for that. The hover over effects that I showed, right now it's only on hover, so it's only when you're using a mouse. But when you're on a mobile device, you actually translate that into a tap. So when someone taps, you do the same type of animation, the same type of transitions. You're just showing it, on a tap instead of a hover. What you'll see after that, there's actually a secondary to that is, let's say it's a link, and on hover it would show a different state, but on tap or on click from a desktop browser, maybe it would navigate you somewhere. So this is think of this as like the navigation. When you're hovering over it, it fades in, it shows something, it shows the navigation underneath and the content of that. But if you click on it, it actually goes into that section. For a mobile browser, what you would do is you would say on tap, expand. But if it's already expanded and you tap again, navigate. So there's differences in how you think about mobile in the interactivity that you have on your site. And this isn't just for micro-interactions. You'll actually see this on...
Yeah, we're already using that for mega menus design, the click to open, click to close, but just something good to keep in mind.
Yes.
So the last question is, where's the best place to start if I want to go ahead and include micro-interactions in my site?
Well, that's a great question. We are already implementing these into new builds or refreshes that we're executing now. But if you're not in a project and you'd like to add some of these micro-interactions, come talk to us. Talk to your account person. We can do a quick site audit and look at where there might be opportunities to add these in, and we can work with you on that. It is something that's kind of just part of our process for newer builds, but like we talked about in the webinar, it's definitely something you can add to existing sites, and that's kind of the beauty of it.
All right, well, thank you, Pete and Jessica. It looks like there aren't any more questions that have come in. Again, and as always, if you have additional questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to me at tortiz@onenorth.com, and I will definitely pass your questions along to the appropriate person. Slides and recording will be available shortly. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great day.